Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to the final word ahead of our round 21 clash against St Kilda this Sunday afternoon, 1:40 at Marvel Stadium. It has been a massive week for North Melbourne fans everywhere. It has been a particularly big week here on the channel. We have been joined by some incredible guests. Sammy joined me for the preview and David King joined me earlier in the week to sit down and talk about North Melbourne and where things are at for the club at this late stage of the season. I just wanted to thank both of them again for jumping on and being so generous with their time this week. And I wanted to thank all of you guys watching at home as well. I know it has been a really, really difficult week, and further, it's probably been a really difficult sort of 4 to 5 weeks, and I think the icing was very much on the cake following our loss to Geelong last Saturday night, and for you guys to still be invested in the channel and to still really engage with the content that I've brought out this week, it really means the world to me, and I cannot thank all of you enough, not just for sticking by me, but for hopefully being able to process your emotions over the past sort of 6 to 7 days and look ahead to stick by the club once again this Sunday afternoon. I still see it as a winnable game, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the video, but it's tough, and I think the best way for all of us to get through the rest of this season, hopefully a couple more wins to come, but the off season and then to go again next year, is just to stick together. I think North Melbourne is such a unique community of supporters and such a close-knit group of supporters, and I think if something that I've taken away from this week is that through all the highs and all the lows, we're all in this together, and Kingy coming on the channel and wanting to engage with North Melbourne supporters is a perfect example of that in a time where the club and the supporters are really hurting and probably just in need of a little bit of a voice of reason and just something to sort of hold the faith a little bit. So I just wanted to express my thank you and my gratitude once again, and just really hope that everyone watching at home is doing okay. And footy is an outlet. It's a real passion for so many of us, and I can understand that there are bigger things in life than footy, but it's also used as an escapism. So when things in the escapism isn't going the way you might have hoped, then it may be a little bit difficult. So I just wanted to send lots of love to all of you watching at home, and another big thank you, not just for supporting the channel over its duration, but in particular the last week has been enormous. So I just want to start off with that little message for all of you watching at home. Now let's get into all the bits and pieces left to talk about ahead of our round 21 clash against the Saints. Something that I spoke about in the preview with Sammy, and I also spoke about with Kingy, and in my review post the Geelong game, is a little bit of frustration around some of the messaging coming out of the club at the moment, in that we know where we're at, but where exactly is that? I feel like supporters are being kept at arm's length a little bit at the moment, and I understand it's probably to protect the playing group as much as they can be protected. It is quite brutal out in the AFL world at the moment, but I did find some of the comments that were made post-main training on Thursday quite interesting, and probably filled me with a little bit more hope than I was feeling a few days ago. Here's what Clarko had to say in his press conference following main training on Thursday.
Well, if you came inside the walls of our footy club, you perhaps wouldn't notice so much that we'd had the sort of loss that we had in the performance we had last week. You know, the mood and the spirit and the recognition of where we're at and what we've got to do to get to work to get ourselves back up the ladder. That's been terrific. You know, the performance of our second side last week in a game here against the Cats was really, really strong, and so yeah, the mood's good. We know what we need to do and the things that we need to do, but it just takes time. Yeah, I wouldn't have come back if I didn't want to do this job, and yeah, I love the challenge of it. It's a significant challenge, but I don't see it as any different to the challenge I had when I first arrived at Hawthorn. You know, no senior coach, no CEO. You know, political turmoil within the footy club, you know, less than 25,000 members, and in a very, very quick space of time that club was able to turn itself around, and I'm confident it can be done here as well, and enjoying the challenge of it. It's not easy. As I always say, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Now, look, those comments may be small on the surface, but I do think it speaks volumes about where the club is at internally. And I think that it's so important to recognise that the club is probably in a better position than we may give it credit for. And what I mean by that is Obviously, on-field, the performances just aren't living up to expectation at the moment. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. What we've seen for the past 5 weeks in particular hasn't been good enough, and the inability to capitalise on dominance in games and being able to put away wins when we've been in winning positions earlier in the season also hasn't been good enough. And you'd really hope and think that those sorts of things will start to change when the winning starts to come. And obviously it's a bit of chicken or egg, you know, the winning in the tight situations is going to come when we do start winning, but we've got to win games to be able to nip the close ones. So it's a bit of a tricky position to be in, but at the very least, it's really good to know that the club and the players are kind of still all in, and they've all bought in and they're all invested. You know, we've seen some clubs over the time and over the journey that have just been in complete tatters, and Clarko even spoke about his early days of Hawthorn and how the club internally was so broken. And it's really nice to know that the energy and the spirit and the mood is still really strong and generally positive amongst the playing group at this point in time. And then Clarko is still just always backing his players, and I think that is just so important. Clearly there's a really strong bond between Clarko and the playing group and amongst the playing group themselves, and Kingy did allude to that in our chat earlier in the week as well. And I think it was probably just a little bit of a, okay, like it's a moment to just sort of stop and reflect and think, things maybe are bad now, but potentially that's going to be something that's going to hold us in good stead further down the track. It was really, really nice to hear from Clarko, and I think that he did open up a little bit more in his press conference after training on Thursday. I definitely felt a lot more comforted by his comments that were made in that press conference as opposed to last Saturday night, and I understand the heat of the game and the emotion immediately after the game. Maybe there's a little bit of a different approach there from both the journalists that were attending the press conference and Clarko. But I think sitting here now, compared to how I was feeling after the game on Saturday night, I definitely feel a lot better, and I'm definitely feeling optimistic heading into the game against St Kilda on the weekend. One thing I do find a little bit odd, and I'm not saying it to have a swipe at St Kilda, but before the game coming up on Sunday, it is St Kilda's home game. They are going to be playing the final quarter on the big screen at Marvel Stadium as sort of a pre-match hype up, I suppose, or a bit of a pre-game show ahead of the main event at 1:40. Not taking away anything from the win, because it was absolutely phenomenal stuff at Marvel Stadium last weekend. I don't want to take away anything from what they were able to do. It's a, history breaking win for St Kilda, and that's wonderful. But I just find that a little bit strange. Like, for me, and maybe this will work in our advantage, and this is something that makes me feel quite comfortable as we approach Sunday's game. That to me just says they're not really giving us much respect at all. And look, I don't blame them, considering what our result was over the weekend as opposed to theirs. But prior to round 20, I really saw this contest with St Kilda as quite an even one, and probably something I did and still do give us a relatively good chance of winning. Despite what happened against Geelong last week, I actually feel like that will, if anything, put a bit of fire in the belly and hopefully motivate us a little bit to respond. And I do think that we are able to, more often than not, find a way to respond on the back of really big losses. I do, and I have said this before, I do find that a little bit frustrating that it's these massive thumpings that is what it takes to kind of get us going and get us fired up. But you know what? We're in this position now. We may as well make the most of it. St Kilda, I think, are probably still hanging on a little bit to the win last week against Melbourne, and their decision to play the last quarter pre-game is a bit of fun, and it's really not that deep. But from my perspective, it just kind of makes me feel like they're probably going into this and A, full of confidence, which is awesome, and like I said, fair enough and full kudos to them, but B, maybe not just giving us enough respect. So I would just keep one eye open on that if I was in the inner sanctum of North Melbourne over the next couple of days, and really look at this and think they're still riding a high and riding a wave of what happened against the D's last week, and they probably think that if they find themselves in this position again this week against North, then we would just be an easy beat and they'd be able to run all over the top of us. I don't want them to feel like they can disrespect us on Sunday, and we need to first and foremost respect ourselves and go out there and put on an absolute show. But secondly, we just need to make them regret that decision, because like I said, prior to round 20, I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. I think this is a fairly even contest. Their forward line is pretty weak, and while our defence is the weakest part of the ground, I don't think that their midfield is necessarily overwhelmingly better than ours. They do have a few really solid players in there, but I would back our midfield in to match it with them. And so, look, we'll get to selection in just a second, but on the surface going into this game, I still feel okay. I don't think that there was any excuse for Saturday's performance against Geelong. I have said way too much about that game over the past week. We don't need to dive into it any further than it already has been spoken about. But I'm actually feeling okay. And I really hope you guys are as well. And look, I know that there is very little that would be enticing a lot of the fan base to head to the game on Sunday afternoon. I completely understand that. And while I know I'll be there, and I hope that as many of you are as well, I can understand those who don't want to be there, but dare to dream. And, you know, if we can find a way to respond and find a way to chalk up the 4 points. I know that there's probably a lot of people who aren't feeling overly confident. But if we can find a way, then I'd hate for the passionate supporters who have been through a real roller coaster in season 2025 so far to miss out. So definitely, if you can make it down to Marvel Stadium, if you can get there early, you can even catch the last quarter of St Kilda and Melbourne from last weekend. But hopefully we will see a Marvel Stadium that is chock-a-block with blue and white, and we can cheer on North Melbourne to another famous victory. Okay, it's time to address team selection, and I do have a few things I want to say on this. First up, the ins. We've got some massive names returning to this lineup. George Wardlaw and Nick Clarko both make their long-awaited returns to the side. Cooper Harvey is also back. He missed last week with illness, so it's awesome to see him recalled immediately. I thought his 2 games previously to the Geelong game was absolutely sensational, and credit where credit's due. He's really been able to turn his form around. I know it's only a sample size of 2 games, but it's really nice to see him get reward for the effort and for the performances that he had in those 2 weeks prior for that immediate call-up. The outs, unfortunately, Jai Simpkin has been sidelined with injury, and I know that we never want anyone to be sidelined due to injury, but we have spoken about Jai a few times over the past couple of weeks on the channel, and potentially a little bit of a rest and an opportunity to recharge is what's best for him at this stage. He will be joined on the sidelines by Finbar Maley and Will Dawson, who have both been omitted. And I'm disappointed, and I think a lot of fans tonight will be sitting there feeling the same way. I feel like on the back of a 101-point thrashing, more than 2 unforced changes would have been warranted in this situation. And the positive is that the inclusions are fabulous. You've got 2 of our best 23 players straight back into the side. We've definitely been feeling the absence of both Larky and George, and obviously what Cooper Harvey showed in those couple of weeks before he was out of the side with illness was another big booster, and I think he was someone that we were all really positive and felt really comfortable and excited about, and it was one of the only things we had to be excited about over the past few weeks, to be perfectly honest. But I just look at the side and I look at a few players who have retained their spot, and I just don't feel like they need to be there. And I know that probably sounds harsh, and I do have my theory as to why there are a couple of players who have survived this round 20 cull, but do I think we can win with the team that's on paper? Yes, I do. And so that is definitely an important thing to consider as well. But 101 points we lost by to Geelong, and we've only made 2 unforced changes in a side that has had so much disruption to it over the past 6 weeks. The end of the season is near. There are quite a number of contracts that are coming to an end, and for me, there's so many question marks around so many of these players simply because we just haven't seen enough from them. Geordie Payne would be one of the most unlucky players in the AFL at the moment. I have no idea what more he needs to do to get a spot, and not to start singling out players, but Jacob Constanti, who I feel like has been a very solid contributor across season 2025 and a very solid role player, probably just isn't really doing enough for me at the moment. And he'll be there next year. Geordie Payne's contract is still in limbo. And this neglection to select him over the past few weeks says to me that maybe his papers are already stamped. And I think that's a real shame, because I think he really has been doing everything he can, at least to have an opportunity in this side. And we're simply not giving him that chance. So I think it's really disappointing for him. I think that he could add to the side what JK is already adding, and maybe a little bit more. He's laid over 100 tackles in the VFL so far this season, and for an AFL side that is so desperately in need of some defensive grit and pressure, you would think he would be the perfect inclusion in this side. But clearly the selection committee have got other ideas. Over the other end, I think the elephant in the room at the moment is Griffin Logue. It is really disappointing to see Will Dawson dropped at the expense of Griff. Aside from Saturday night against Geelong, I haven't minded Griff's defensive efforts. I actually think he's been okay in the air. Spoiling marking's been pretty good. Where his game has let us down, and this is across majority of the players in the side at the moment, is his disposal is just absolutely killing us. And when you've got someone like Will Dawson, who has shown some really, really nice signs of development over the past month, he would be the one that I would be persisting with in this instance. There's also Caleb Daniel, who Kingy and I both spoke about at length in our chat on Monday, and he spoke about in the media immediately after our game against Geelong last weekend and on the first crack on the Sunday night. Also isn't really adding much for me at the moment. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, at this exact point in time, just sucking up our pride and dropping him to the VFL and giving someone like a Zane Dersma an opportunity, as Kingy mentioned, to play that role, or even bring back Zach Fisher. Now, is Zach Fisher an improvement on Caleb Daniel? I don't know. There's an opinion, and everyone's probably got an opinion on that. For me, what I like about Zach Fisher as opposed to Caleb Daniel, and I did say this with Kingy on Monday, I just really like Zach Fisher's intent. You know the effort is always going to be there. You know he's going to have the second and third follow-ups. You know that he is really, really hungry to win his own ball back. It's something that I just haven't seen from Daniel at the moment. And when he's an attacking defender whose disposal isn't really where we need it to be at the moment, then, as Kingy mentioned, what exactly are you adding to this side? The only thing that I've come to as some sort of potential conclusion for what both of those players are still doing in our side at this point in time, with the exception of injuries, because we know the backline depth is just decimated by injury at the moment, but Logue and Daniel are the only senior players in the defense at the moment. There's no Luke McDonald. There's no Aiden Core. I think while Luke McDonald in particular is missing from that backline, potentially they're looking for a bit of leadership and a bit more of a senior figure to be able to help the young guys around him. Now, the problem is that neither Logue nor Daniel's performances have been leadership worthy at the moment, and I just don't feel like they are displaying leadership traits at the moment. Even when Jai has had a couple of stints in the back line, at least you know that he's going to give you 100% effort, and you know he's going to just do whatever he can to help the side out. His disposal too has been a little bit hit and miss over the past few weeks, but he's not someone that you can fault for trying at the very least. So I know that we need more than trying from our senior figures at the moment, and we've got excellent leadership up forward, and we've got very stable leadership in the middle of the ground as well. So that's the only conclusion or only thing I can really think of heading into this game as to why Logue and Daniel, Logue in particular, retains his spot over the likes of a Will Dawson. But the flip side, and I mentioned this before, I do think like this side on paper is capable of beating St Kilda. I do think that the inclusion of Larky, as Clarko mentioned in his press conference yesterday as well, it probably allows Charlie Comben to start back, and we'll go with Logue, Pink and Comben as our three-pronged tall defence. It's the first time we've had only three tall defenders for a number of weeks now, and I really, really prefer that as a structure for us. Hopefully someone like Zane Dersma can come off the halfback and just give us a little bit of something. I really hope that that's where they choose to play him, unleash Foss a little bit further up the ground, maybe move him to the wing. I think he was really, really solid as the game went on against Geelong. And hopefully up forward, Cooper Harvey can fire alongside Zurha, alongside Curtis, along the likes of a returning Nick Larkey and Jack Darling. I hate that Jack Darling will be returning to his role, pinch hitting in the ruck, but c'est la vie. Hopefully it won't impact what he is still able to do for us up forward. That's where I'll leave it for today, guys. I'm feeling very tired after a massive week, but I actually am feeling really, really good about it. And I'm feeling pretty optimistic. Like I said, I think there probably is a little bit disappointment around the team selection, but on paper, the side looks pretty strong. And I'm really hoping that we can just take it up to St Kilda and hopefully respect ourselves and demand respect from the opposition and be able to come away with the 4 points on the back of what's been a really disappointing 4 to 5 weeks as a North supporter. That's how I'm feeling. What about you guys? Feel free to leave all of your thoughts in the comments down below. We can also continue the conversation over on socials, Kanga TV show, across Instagram, Facebook, X and email. I hope to see a blue and white army make their way to Marvel Stadium on Sunday afternoon. It'll be great to see all of you guys there. It'll be great to catch up in the review after the game as well. Let's just hope, as always, it is one where we are smiling and celebrating. Look after yourselves, guys, and go Roos.